Take it from the top with the energy. Going on a tangent there. Yeah, talking about the energy behind. It's not so much about the tactics you said, it's really about the energy. How do you mean by that?
Again, it's about your intention. Um, your intention, it really just boils down to whether your intention is to get the sale or your
Hmm.
intention is to help the person get what it is that they want and what they need. It's not just about what they want, it's what they need. I mean, they're two separate things there,
Hmm.
you know. I mean, I want an ice cream, but do I need it?
Mm.
You
It's
know,
interesting because that's actually something that I've used on sales calls before, where it's something that sometimes I use for compare and contrast because you'll find that sometimes you get surface level answers from people, and you can tell with a certain level of intuition that it's not that they're just giving you an answer for the sake of giving you an answer, but it doesn't have that level of emotional gravitas to it for it to have weight
yeah,
for you to use.
yeah.
But that's actually a frame that I've used, and I know that's something you want, but is that really something you need? And then sometimes you can use that to bridge the gap. But we mentioned a moment ago prior to the recording starting, a lot of the questions you get, sometimes you find that it's not so much about um, the tactic, but more so the intention. I guess, how do you know when someone's actually building the intention properly? Or I guess, in what ways do you kind of help guide or shape the creation or developing someone's intention or intuition, as I'd say?
Well, from my point of view, when I'm training and coaching,
Mm,
yeah. It's sort of intuition, I guess, sort of on my part. I can tell where they're coming from by the way that they're asking the questions. And always at the beginning it can be sometimes somewhat of a struggle because you're trying to formulate questions as you go, the more interesting questions. You know, it's like if you want interesting answers, then ask interesting questions. And the question comes up, well, what's an interesting question? An interesting question is something to do with getting behind what someone says.
yeah.
And that's to do, I mean, we could talk about a whole myriad of things here because it's also to do with listening. And most salespeople don't listen. They listen for what they want to hear rather than what the other person is really saying and meaning. And a lot of times, what the other person is saying is sometimes not what they're meaning. Okay, they just say it. And so you grab that as an opportunity to find out what that's meaning. We're going down the rabbit hole now because in effect, there's a lot of variance that goes on, and it only happens when you get experience. It happens when you start realizing that it's not about just asking questions. You know, it's asking the right types of questions at the right time, which is basically third principle of natural selling. And it's developing the skill. And the only way you can develop the skill is to do it. And as you
Hmm.
do it, you come to realize that in fact certain things are working, not working. And then you go back to basics, you go back to the course, for example, or you get some coaching or whatever it is you need to talk about that. And so it develops as you go. It's extremely experiential.
You raised some very good points on that. You could probably see me like almost, bursting at the seams to say a couple of things, but yeah, on the
Yeah,
point,
I can understand that. And the question now comes is kind of what point do you want to raise? Because
yeah,
there's a myriad of things that are going in there. And I'm sort of
yeah.
I'm letting you know a myriad of things, which each one can sort of have a discussion point for, 5 or 10 minutes just on its own.
Oh, certainly. Well, there's one that I do want to cover, but I want to graze over one thing as well that I think I
Sure.
mean, we went past it, but understanding the difference between what they say and what they mean,
Right.
that is a crucial one. There has been so many times I feel like that's a certain phase of a rep's development to be able to have enough, what I would say, situational awareness in the call to be able to silence their mind enough to actually take a moment to look at what they mean. And I think the best way to develop that is actually just by watching your own calls enough and watching the conversations enough objectively outside of the call, because when you're not in the call and you take a moment and you actually just play it as like a film and you just watch it back, it's amazing how much stuff you'll see that you didn't see when you're in the moment. But I think that's also because, like you said, you're blinded with what you want to hear and what you're looking for so much sometimes. But
But
that
look at
comes with
it, look,
learning.
yeah, look at it this way. You ask a question, right? And you get an answer. There's lots
Mm-hmm.
of ways of looking at this. Is that answer could actually have 1 to 5 components to it. It could have
Hmm.
5 actual things that come up. One of those things could be quite important from I call it vibrational level. So a person
Hmm.
could tell you, you could say, so what you could ask a question. So what is it you're actually looking for? Okay. And they give you an answer. And in that answer, as I said, there could be 5 different components, or up to 5, maybe even more different components, depending on whether you let them go on or not.
Yeah.
The key is to listen not just for the logical side of what they want, but see what if there's a kind of a personal component in there, which is sometimes they come up with a little bit of why they want it. And
Yeah.
so, and for example, we did a role play the other day where the question was, how soon do you want to get the funds to be able to do this? Or actually, the question was, how soon do you want the money from the sale of your home? And the response was, I want the money as soon as possible. All right. Then the person went on to then ask some background questions. To me, that was missed. They didn't hear that. They didn't hear that, and that's where experience comes in. That's where coaching comes in, and so on, and that allows you to listen for those things that you didn't expect.
Hmm.
So it's like this. There was a survey done many years ago where some basketball students, were told to play basketball, but there were some students who were watching this, and they were told to watch this basketball being played. And I
Hmm.
believe it was that they were told to count the number of times that the basketball was passed,
Oh,
right?
I've seen this video, right?
Right?
Where it's it's
Yeah.
it's yeah, yeah.
And then they were saying, so what did you see on this video? And they all came back with the number of times the basketball was passed. And then they were asked, did you see the bear walking across? No, the gorilla walking across the basketball court,
Yeah.
right? And they said, what gorilla? So they showed it again. Now they had an awareness of the gorilla. There was a gorilla that walked across the basketball court.
Yeah.
And the whole thing is that we see things in our own perspective and world based on sort of what we're told to do and so on and so forth. But what we miss a lot of time is that our subconscious sort of is missing what is actually going on. So as soon
Yeah.
as you see that, you go, oh, there's a gorilla walking across
Hmm.
the room. And it's the same sort of thing, is that you train your mind to listen for things that you wouldn't normally listen for. So the question behind the answer to the previous question, which was, I want to get the money as soon as possible, is that to me, what came instantaneously was, what is as soon as possible mean to you?
Wow. I didn't think of that when because I was thinking about what would be the question you'd ask, and that was I wanted to jump out and say, whoa, hold on, like what does as soon as possible mean?
So that because the question you have to ask yourself is, do I understand what this person is talking about? Do I understand what they're meaning? And here's another clue. Many times people don't know themselves what they're meaning or what they're asking. A lot of times people are asking a question just to get the ball rolling, or answering a question just to get the ball rolling, or something that's coming up for them in their mind.
I've
And
I've seen that
and
before on
things
calls.
to expand
Mhm.
on it.
I was gonna say, sorry, I've seen that before on calls because you'll find sometimes the dynamic with some people, especially sometimes when it comes to handling concerns at the end of the call, um, that they'll kind of take the back seat and they'll let you lead. Now it's on you to kind of know how to get them to where they want to go because you're both in agreement that you want to get there and you know that they can't. But like I think you raised a good point, they don't know what they mean a lot of the time, and they give these concerns or these reasons why they can't do things. But they just kind of they almost need you to rearrange all the variables. I guess do you know what I mean by that, or have you seen that
Well,
before?
yeah, that's a slightly different subject. So we'll go down another rabbit hole here if you like. But yeah,
Hmm.
it is. I mean, you sometimes get a situation where where there's agreement made. That yes, this solution is the right solution. Everything is fine. The pricing is correct and so on. And then you come to commitment, and then you get, well, I think I need to just sort of wait for it, or I need to sort of think about it, or something of that sort. And you're
Hmm.
scratching your head, you're saying, well, we've got everything solved here, right? And
Hmm.
so now the question then comes up is, well, how do you help that person break through what seems to be an internal barrier,
Hmm.
an internal block as to moving forward?
Mhm.
So you keep it, you keep, this is an entirely different subject, but you keep the conversation going. But the skill is helping them to break through that.
Yeah.
And you can do that depending on, we'll swing this right back to sort of an original conversation, depending on your intention. And if your intention is to help, you can ask really deep questions. If your intention is to get the sale, that person will know that you're trying to force the sale. And that's what I'm talking about, mindset and intention. And you
Yeah.
have to really understand how that works, not so much by intellectually, but by actually doing it, feeling it, coming from that place. It's the law of detachment. There are a lot of
Right.
laws, a lot of universal laws, and one of the biggest one for natural selling is the law of detachment, letting go of that need to make a sale. Okay, and if you're going to letting you even go of the need to help that person, there's an irony for you. Even letting go of that.
Yeah, there was a quote that I'd heard once that the game is played in the field. It seems like that's, a paramount portion of natural selling, right? You only get good at it by doing it. Um, One thing, well, uh, I guess the question is, how would you categorize the phases of someone's development in sales? Like, what are the different phases of sales development if you do phases? But yeah, I would say if someone's developing in sales from a complete beginner to expert, what are the different milestones you'll see in their development, and how are they, and sort of what are the levels, and what are they really?
I think it depends on each person, as to where they're entering into this. I mean, from my point of view, is where they're entering into sort of the natural selling sort of arena. I mean,
Mhm.
because the first part is mindset. Most people, when they ask me questions, are usually to do with skills. How do I say this, or what do I do here, or how do I respond to this? But the question is well, first of all, what's the background to this question? Because unlike, if you like, standard sales training, you're given a response. Well, this is how you respond. Well, I can't do that, because I have to know why not so much why they're asking that question, but um, what was the background to it, to be able to give an answer that is as precise as I can to that specific situation. It's really about situation.
I
Um,
wonder too, well, before we move too far, I'm just thinking about the mindset behind that, right? Because you ask what is the background, and my first thought is I would have a hard time asking a background question without radiating the intent, because I feel like I would do that sometimes just to give an answer that's more in alignment of what you want to hear, as opposed to just giving a better answer for you. Um, but do you feel like that's a flawed mindset to have about it?
Not necessarily. I mean, sometimes background questions, you don't have any option, but you start with the background question, which tends to be fairly logical. But what you're
Mhm.
looking to do is to develop that into sort of one of the other six different types of questions, if it's important enough. I mean, there's some background questions you don't develop at all. I mean, you say sort of, how tall is your house? That's a background question. You're not going to start getting into feelings like, how do you feel about that? It's just like,
Yeah.
it's a background question, period. But if you look at your background questions that you ask, usually, almost always, there are questions that you can develop, which as one way of starting the process of getting behind where they're coming from.
Do you
So people,
find that? Mhm.
yeah, people buy for different reasons, and it's not just, people buy the same color car and same make and so on and so forth, for entirely different reasons than anyone else. And it might seem superficial. You can ask a few questions and it might seem that they come up with the same reasons, but fundamentally inside themselves, in here, they're buying it for something really personal. And
Yeah.
if you dig deep enough, they'll tell you what that is. If you have that trust, they'll tell you what that is. And as they're telling themselves and listen and responding to you, that's where the relationship is really being cemented, because they go, wow, this person really kind of understands what I need here.
Yeah. No, you raise a hmm. Yeah, I guess I feel like I've been there. I mean, there's books that I've read before that talk about persuasion. One of the key things is just like, well, if you can really truly understand what the other person wants, sometimes that's enough. And you don't really have to you don't have to try. to, get the sale if you just really put all your focus on understanding what they want. Because there comes a point where you've helped them articulate so much that there's so much trust in you that if you're saying this would be the next natural next step, they believe you because you're the first person in a long time that's taken. But that's not a tangent I want to go down right now. But coming back to the reps development, because I think about one thing that really I spent a lot of time focusing on when I first started in sales was really being maniacal about where I am in my development process and how do I know if I'm getting better. Because you raise a really good point, right? There's a certain phase I find in reps developments where they get, maybe it's not a phase, but a pattern where their intuition develops a little bit and then they stop developing the intuition and then they fall on a bunch of these tactics and then they get lost in all these tactics because they're just trying all these things, but they're not coming from the right place and none of them stick. And then they come to me and they'll ask, same thing with scripting, for example. I have some people that come on my community calls and it's like we spent time making a really good script and flow and I explained why it is what it is. They used it twice, didn't exactly get the result they wanted. And they come back 3 weeks later asking, hey, can you review this script? And I'm like, no, I'm not going to review that script. We created this process. This process works. Why are you bringing me this script? Well, that script didn't work and this one isn't working either. Well, maybe it's not the script. It's like, do you understand why you're asking these questions in the place you do? But the first question was, well, to the best you can, how would you categorize or classify the phases of a rep's development? Or what are the stages of intelligence you feel like a not intelligence, but like what are the different levels of skill a rep kind of goes through in their development? Because I felt like there was one is just learning the language and I think being comfortable like in the career of selling. And like two is now you can actually have one is being comfortable asking the questions, understanding what the questions are, just knowing how to say them properly in the right tone. Then two is you can actually be situationally aware in the call where you're asking the questions, but there's now emotional momentum. Like you're actually having rapport. When you ask these questions, you're actually developing a bit of a relationship with that person. It's no longer just kind of blindly call and response. And then three is now you have almost full creative freedom where the questions, you don't even think about them. They're innate. The state and the intuition's there where the questions just come from some part of you that's been developed and you're solely focused on navigating the highs and lows of the emotional relationship needed to help someone commit. But that's where I'd ask, what are the categories of maybe because those are my three distinctions. But once again, I don't have nearly as much experience as you or as trained as many people. That's why I asked, like, what would you say are the stages in someone's development as they get better, and how do they know what they're in?
The answer to your question is yeah, you're right. But again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier. It depends on each person.
Yeah.
It depends on their development, and they know, they know themselves. I mean, first of all, the one key aspect is taking action.
Mm-hmm.
Is taking, for example, I had somebody, one of my clients, take action or required them to take action after a training call to do to call 6 people.
Random people?
6 people they know.
They know personally.
To ask exactly the same questions that they would ask a potential buyer because they were struggling with asking that question. I said, just go and ask these people. Don't tell them what you're doing. Just hit. And I gave them a way to preface it, how to set it up. I said, ask them exactly the same question, word for word. Don't mess around with it. And they held back from doing that for 2 weeks. And so we spoke about it as to what's the resistance? Why do you feel you're resisting? How are you preventing yourself from moving forward? That's a personal responsibility question, for example. That's one of the 7 different types of questions. And we spoke about it. And I said, okay, then before we can move forward, you're going to have to do this. Okay, you need to break through this. This is important because this is how you create immediate relationship. And if you're not interested in doing that, then let's not do anything. Let's not move forward. So immediately afterwards, he got on the phone and called and WhatsApped me and said, just call 2 people. And then the next session, we spoke about it. I said, how do you feel about that? And he says, amazing. He said, amazing what people told me. I said, well, how did you feel about actually doing it? And he said, well, great, comfortable, and so on. I said, so now you're broken through. You can do that with your friends. Can you do it with a stranger? He's like, yeah. So then go and do it. So it's those sort of breakthroughs. So it depends on where it is and where a person is, whether they're going to do it. But I mean, you've got to take action. I just know when I started selling, before I came and did all this stuff, I mean, I was always looking for another way because I just felt the old way was, the standard way, which is still being taught, was just
Yeah.
abhorrent. It just didn't resonate with me. And I couldn't wait when I went back to my friend Jerry Federico, who was the sales manager of the solar center, who supplied all the solar collectors, and he knew what he was talking about. I said, Jerry, sort of, how do I deal with this? Like any people who are asking me this question, I don't know how to answer it. Oh, that's
Yeah.
that easy. And he gave me the answer. And I couldn't wait to go back and actually hope that this next person would actually ask me that question so I'd know how to respond just to see if it worked. And it worked. It was great. And it built confidence. But that's where I was. I was prepared to take action on it. And so the
Yeah.
question comes up is that if you don't take action, does anything change? And the answer is no. And you sometimes have to go with the fork in the road. You're traveling along, for example, like this and then all of a sudden you come to a fork and you've got a choice. You can either take this one. The balloon's going up. I don't know what's going on there, but anyway, you can either sort of take this one, which is the road that you know about, the one you've been taught about, the one you believe, based on whatever stuff is going in your mind, or you just drop that one and take this road, the road less traveled. And it's the road less traveled most times will take you and the person you're talking with to where you want to go. I mean, that's really kind of the thing. And it's that mindset. It's like coming to a field, walking across the field and coming to a fence and a gate, and there's this stop sign, do not enter here. It's like, okay, so who's that meant for? I'm not sure it was meant for me. I'm just going to walk across. Seems innocent enough because I'm going to do what's on the other side of that stop sign, which is there's nothing on the other side of the stop sign. Therefore, there's nothing to stop me. And what's the worst can happen? Someone can come up, a farmer can come up and say, you're trespassing. Oh, I'm sorry. Which way do you want me to go? Continue that way? Is which way I want to go? Or do you want me to go back? I mean, it's really so. It's like freeing yourself from the shackles of the prison of your own mind. I mean, think about this, for example. Most people are in a cage. Okay.
Yes.
Think of a cage. You got these bars there. Okay. So what's holding you back? What's holding you back?
Nothing.
What's keeping you inside? What's keeping you inside the cage? Most people say the bars. Well, it's not. It's what's in between the bars. It's your mind. That's what holding you back. It's not those bars. Prisoners who escape, for example, they don't think about those bars. They think about what's in between those bars. How do I get out in between those bars? And they work out ways to escape. Not a great analogy. I appreciate that. But anyway, it just sort of gives you an idea. So we become prisoners of our own mind. It's not the bars that are keeping us in. It's the space between the bars.
It's amazing how much you can believe the bars are there. What advice would you give to rekindling the spirit to want to take action? Because I find that I kind of emotionally, I don't know, just I feel like I'm congesting my thoughts now, trying to condense the words too much. But I find sometimes that my creative essence or sort of aggression in that sense of wanting to try new things and optimism, it kind of comes and goes in waves. I've had periods where, okay, super optimist, let's try everything and anything. And then I run into spans where I'm not as optimistic. And so I believe that things are there, maybe more so. But what advice would you give for anybody who's maybe in a position right now where they know that they want to be that person who's the optimist, trying new things, taking more action, but aren't? And maybe they're just in a phase where they're not, or they've had a lot going on, or maybe they just know that they want to be, but they can't. Is there any advice you'd give there?
Yeah, do it. I mean, Nike, the footwear manufacturer, they got to do it. Do it now. 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 Just do it. And do what? In fact, I've got a little thing over here on the. There we go. There's a little card that I use just on the side here. Focus on what I want. Everything else is a distraction.
Yeah.
That's how you go about doing it. What's another one I've got up here? Can't do that one. That's too personal. Just little sort of things. Like we all fall for it. I'll start in the morning and go, oh, I need to do. Here's something I need to do. I need to pull together this whatever it is I'm going to do, right? But first, I've got a few administration things that get out of the way. Well, it's easy to fall into that because now you start looking at your website, you start looking at this, just easy to be distracted. But the first step to change is awareness, and being aware about that and saying, well, am I doing myself or my clients or anyone else a favor by doing this side stuff when in reality I need to do this? I don't want to do it, but I need to do it. Therefore, I'm
Right.
going to do it. Is it swing this whole thing back full circle? It's wants a need.
Yeah.
So then I slap my face metaphorically and say, okay, get on with it. And when I've done that, I feel a lot better. But if I don't
Yeah.
do it and I do the other stuff and I do what I should do, what I really need to do half-heartedly, or I don't do it, or I put it off to the next day, I don't feel good. So how do I make myself feel better? By being aware of my feelings and what is going to make me happy at the end of the day. And the end of the day is to complete the necessary tasks. And so when you're in this process of selling, you complete the necessary task, which is basically to learn new structures of how you can talk with people, how you can change the questions you ask to make them more interesting, and taking action on it. Like I said before, without action, does anything change? Nothing changes. Zero, zilch.
Hmm.
And so the way you look at yourself is to be aware of what you're doing, then get on with it. There's an old saying about pull yourself up by the bootstraps,
Yeah.
which is not used because it's sort of I don't know, it's a bit old fashioned, I guess, but it's a way of doing it. Pull yourself up, focus it on what you want, then do it. Everything else is a distraction.
Yeah. As you say that, I felt like I don't know, I was just going swimming through my own thoughts in the moment, thinking about different things. And
Well,
yeah.
we've spoken about a lot of things here. I mean, there's a lot of rabbit holes that you can go down. But the nice thing about going down natural selling rabbit hole is that is there's a kind of a bountiful box at the end. You go down, you meet various characters and so on and so forth. But at the end there, it's always a nice ending. Whether in fact someone buys or doesn't buy, it's always a nice ending because people remember the conversation.
Yeah.
People know that you've come from this place of help. I mean, for example, for me, one of the worst things anyone can call me is a good salesperson, because unless
Yeah.
they've got it, unless they're referencing it from the point of view of where I'm coming from, and I can tell if they're not,
Right.
and so but if they're referencing it from the point of view of the standard idea of what a salesperson is, that's not something I like to hear, and I don't hear it because I don't come from that place.
Right. Well, there's almost a classification where they don't even those labels don't even trigger in their mind because you're so far different from what they would see or hear or qualify or classify that you almost become just a normal human being. And I think that's one thing that, like, I've told people that, especially with cold calling, like people who do cold calling, it's like, look, your job isn't really to be a phenomenal cold caller. Your job is to just be the first person they're having a real conversation with about something that they want. And if you can just bring that state and that energy, but it's tested, you're tried. And I think, like what you said, is the key is you have to, I mean, one, be detached, but keep the state, keep the energy, well, take action. And I think the one way to become more convicted in those things and to make it more of a part of you is to take more action on them, because if you weren't convicted you wouldn't be taking the action, and that feedback loop feeds into itself. And another thing you talk about
Well,
too. Mhm.
well, I think I mentioned this before. Is Sebastian Coe, two-time Olympic gold winner, Olympic, and his whole thing was his focus was never on the gold medal. It was never on the
Mhm.
gold medal. It was on the everyday improvement. It was the everyday observation of what he was doing and moving forward and taking action and improving each time. Finding out the weaknesses and finding help as to how to eliminate, remove the weaknesses, or take advantage of the weaknesses. But it was always about improvement. And at the end of the day, you will get the results. Deepak Chopra calls that success is the realization of worthy goals. I mean, that was basically a paraphrase. And that's
Yeah.
all you're doing. So each day you create this worthy goal, moving yourself forward. But perhaps we should make this another session, and
Yeah, no, without a doubt. I know.
come up with some specific questions, and just sort of see if we can develop answers to the specific questions instead of opening up new ones. But you know, there's a lot of things that go on, and but even grasping that in your mindset, that there are nuances. You know, there's always nuances to everything, and a nuance to even when someone asks the question. You know, you could have three clients ask you exactly the same question, but their meaning behind that question most times will be entirely different. And it's our job to find out what they're actually meaning. I mean, there's a big clue for you there. What is the meaning behind this question? Unless it's a black and white question, you know, bomb. That's the easy answer. You know, if they say, so does it come in black or white? And you say, well, it comes in both. You know, I mean, you could ask the question, so is there one that you prefer? You know, and they
Yeah,
might say, well, I prefer white. You know, you say, so, you know, that's interesting. So what is about white that you prefer? I mean, now we just started a conversation there. And if they
yeah.
say, and whatever, and it doesn't matter what they say, whether yes or no answer, it's just that you develop a conversation. So we're just about to start another little thing route down here. So
Yeah, no,
why don't we do this at another time?
100%. I was about to say I had something else to add, but we could go down the rabbit hole forever. But as always, I know it's been a pleasure meeting with you, Michael. And yeah, maybe you guys will be seeing some more stuff from us soon. But cool.